a written opinion that made the case why he thought it was appropriate to deny. So fast forward to now 2018, and I mentioned that because the standard that I just mentioned and the questions associated with that I was asked when I presented are the reasons that I thought, legal issues that I thought were important for the panel to consider. And I tried to I referred to in a kind of an encouraging or educational way, like let's look what we know now. Let's examine the information that we have now, and without really being hypercritical or some way demeaning to the previous opinion. Let's just examine it in the context of where we are today, and because this panel already had passed autism, so it's back in front of them again. So I'm thinking to myself, why? What can I say to them? At least do the same thing again. Was something about what Zimmer had said reason for them to rethink their position? At least the people that were there before. I'd like to at least get the same 4-2 votes going around this next time. I want to tell them why they were right and why the opinion was possibly wrong. One of the things that was outrageous and one of the things that's considered, I think, most ridiculous, and I tried to make this as diplomatically as possible, was Zimmer created a fear in his opinion that the physicians who would be recommending cannabis for the children with autism may not be the treating physician of the autistic patient, or it may not be a pediatric specialist of some kind. And there's nothing that would ensure that, which would create a circumstance where doctors may be practicing medicine in an area that they shouldn't be, was a suggestion. Now, this argument is outrageous, one could say, because Mike Zimmer, of course, is the person that's in charge of licensing these physicians. So to suggest that of the doctors to whom he can't trust to do things that they've been given their license to do properly, it would seem ridiculous for him to rely upon that same behavior as a reason to deny the use of, approving autism as a condition on the registry. The other, which I thought was rather outrageous, was that, as a testimony came forward, parents would talk about the kids aren't smoking marijuana, they're using oil and medibles and whatnot as a healing mechanism, as a method of ingestion that has resulted in the palliative or therapeutic relief. And Zimmer took great concerns for that. He suggested at the time that the oils and extractions and medibles were illegal, and parents would be forced to put themselves in a legal quandary because of the Carruthers case. Well, that was then. This is now without even needing to agree or disagree with Carruthers. We know that the legislature passed sweeping amendments.
But his logic is bullshit. Like what he's saying is, well, I don't want these parents to become criminals. So instead of making it very clear that autism's covered and at least offer some protections, he's like, we're not going to offer anything. We'll make it super crystal clear that parents who do this are criminals, is exactly what he said.
And I think the overall theme of all of this would be like, should these people who have these diseases who want to use marijuana and are going to use it anyways be criminalized? Or would you consider putting this on a list so that when they're doing it, at least they can go get a card and have somewhat of the protections? Nevertheless, I agree, Jim, but I was trying to be diplomatic about it, and I tried to point this out to the board that even if that was the case now, which I don't agree with, and we don't have to say Zimmer was bad, we know that the legislation itself says that was not the intent of the law because it applies retroactively. So to Zimmer's opinion, it would seem to be that it was, time, they say time will tell. Time did tell, and it turned out that there was unequivocally the wrong call in that sense. Now, we have the benefit of 20/20 hindsight. We have the benefit of a retroactive law. So it's easy for us to point that out, and who would even suggest that it would go that far, but it was pretty remarkable. Jim, I know you had a lot to do with that, so you get some credit here. In any event,
how much credit do I get?
You get all of it, the entire thing.
Do I get a T-shirt or something?
You're talking now compensation. I was
just talking like some
compensation for costs,
like
maybe
a T-shirt. Yeah.
And it shall not be deemed a controlled substance. So So as it goes, the panel recommended the approval of the following conditions for treatment with medical marijuana, cannabis. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Spinal cord injury. There was another one that was rejected, which was brain injury. That was rejected. Tabled.
They said they would approve traumatic brain injury, but the brain injury was too broad, and so that's one of the ones that we're going to refine and resubmit.
Rheumatoid arthritis passed. Arthritis
Amazing.
passed.
Amazing.
Inflammatory bowel disease. I think that was the only one that had a unanimous vote, or one of two, right? Inflammatory bowel disease and ulcerative colitis also had a unanimous vote, right?
I believe so.
Probably because they're uncomfortable discussing stomach issues.
Or they have a relative
We'll just pass
at it.
Mm-hmm.
Parkinson's, Tourette's.
I think that was unanimous.
Tourette's.
I think so.
Chronic pain, which is different than
Non-severe.
severe and chronic pain.
So mild chronic pain and moderate chronic pain will be covered if that's approved. Same thing with arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. And what's more, the patent says that there's a prophylactic effect of cannabis on arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. And I think that the next round of petitions is going to focus on the prophylactic effects of marijuana. I think that needs to be brought to the board's attention that you don't have to have the condition yet, and using marijuana prevents it.
Well, the one I didn't mention that was voted on, which was quite remarkable, and as I mentioned before, Dr. Eden Wells, who was a no vote the first time around, was somehow swayed in a way that she cast a vote in favor of autism.
That was amazing.
I think she's got a crush on Michael. I'm
And
serious.
the question that remains is,
Sensitivity about children.
what would have caused that change? I remember she was she was actually, there was one particular person on the panel who voted no every single time except for the ones that were, the gastro-inflammatory bowel disease and ulcerative colitis. But recognizably, Dr. Eden Wells voted yes on many of them. But specifically, autism is the one where she was most, to me, it was the most remarkable, and I thought
She
was.
changed her vote.
Here's Dr. Crocker talking about this.
Makes you wonder if
Suffering from chronic pain, arthritis, Parkinson's, or autism could soon have access to medical marijuana. The state review panel is now recommending 10 more qualifying conditions. New at 7, 24-Hour News 8's Marvis Herring is talking with a Kalamazoo doctor who's on that panel and says this is a step in the right direction.
Medical marijuana breaks barriers for people living with autism, according to Dr. David Crocker, and he says he's optimistic that their recommendation to add it to the list will be approved.
The reality is they've shut themselves down because they're overwhelmed.
But Dr. Crocker of Michigan Holistic Health tells me medical marijuana helps people with autism better navigate times of sensory overload. He's prescribed marijuana to some people suffering from qualifying conditions who also are autistic.
On their return visit, talked about how well it was working for their autism.
Obsessive compulsive disorder, rheumatoid arthritis, and inflammatory bowel disease are also on the latest batch of recommendations by the Michigan Medical Marijuana Review Panel. And Crocker calls this progress, helping people manage both physical and psychological issues.
What we've done by fine-tuning the qualifying conditions is we've really opened the program up to a whole nother set of patients that could benefit.
In a statement to 24-Hour News 8, Michigan's chief medical executive says there are parents of children with autism touting the benefits. Some have seen symptoms relieved, but right now, Dr. Eden Wells still wants more research. She writes to us, I cannot recommend medical marijuana as a medication for autism at this time as clinical studies have not been concluded.
So we've seen really good results.
But Dr. Crocker is convinced, and he believes we should keep these conversations about medical marijuana going despite the ongoing push for recreational pot legalization.
Number one, we haven't passed recreational legalization just yet. Recreational legalization does not help minor patients in any way. They still are going to need a medical program to get involved.
Right now, these additional conditions are just recommendations, but the director has to make a decision by July 10th. We'll be watching to see what happens. In Kalamazoo, Marvis Herring, 24-Hour News 8.
All right, so
Dr. Wells changing her vote, that was remarkable.
we did. The news story was that she said she couldn't recommend autism. Was that a previous quote? Did you hear that?
I heard what they said, but she voted for it.
He may have quoted from a previous time. I would. That's a possibility.
And
Anyways, let's talk about some of the reasons that were used, even by Dr. Crocker, for example, to deny some of these conditions and some of the hang-ups. I mean, ultimately, the denial of one and the granting of any other almost can't be reconciled, because the justifications for any denial at all was not were not justified. I mean, but
there were some technical denials in there that were a little bit disheartening.
Or the ones that were denied. Let's talk about this for 10 seconds. What were they?
Anxiety was denied.
Yeah, it's hard to get into the head. Why is that? Why is that denied?
An idea.
Why?
Probably from the paranoia myth. So how could somebody be relieved of their anxiety when you have this cannabis that causes paranoia, which is anxiety? And that's their thought process of probably not being able to conceive how it could actually help someone.
Fabiano's a swing vote, and so therefore I would agree with you on that. That when Fabiano started speaking against anxiety, it didn't matter that
he's
Dr.
a psychiatrist,
Crocker,
isn't he, Fabiano?
Yeah, that's the issue.
Yeah.
Well,
And,
how does it stack up from a peer review compared to, say, for example, rheumatoid arthritis?
Well, I think that if you constrain the anxiety to certain types of anxiety, it gets better. The support gets better. The problem was that Laura actually rejected several of the more specific anxiety petitions for their stupid, incomplete petition reason. And so, therefore, the only one that actually made it through to the panel was the general just anxiety petition. But we had several different anxiety types that were in individual petitions, but all of those were rejected and they didn't make it to the panel at all. So we're going to have to tune those up and get them back to the panel.
You're going to have a really tough time finding psychiatrists and other mental health professionals that'll support the use of marijuana for mental health conditions. That's
Because there's not enough research.
It should be the first thing they go to for it, I would think, to try.
There's no research, and they view it very much as a potential exacerbator of.
But Fabiano,
Right.
I think that Fabiano was willing to grant for psychological conditions. He granted for PTSD, but if he felt that it was going to be directly in opposition to the medications that might be prescribed for it,
Right.
that was when he really came out against it. And I think that was with schizophrenia and anxiety were very, very much in that vein. And once Fabiano says no, the rest of the panel is doomed, is what I noticed.
The ironic part of that is, one of the things that marijuana does for pediatric epilepsy patients is allow them to get off the benzodiazepines. And the addiction that humans form to that medication it is horrible. And with anxiety, that's exactly what they treat it with.
Right.
So,
And the key to those benzodiazepines is short term. If you take those things long term, they start going in reverse on you and making your anxiety worse.
yeah, well, To me, it seems counterintuitive that it would be approved for one but not the other.